Hello and welcome to RCTV. That's a new show that I'm making for Rhythm Changes here on my YouTube channel. Subscribe now, get more episodes when I make them, new conversations I'm bringing you. Like this video and help get a new show off the ground. Let me know what you think in the comments after you hear from this guest, who I consider a mentor, somebody I look up to tremendously in the Canadian jazz scene. It's so cool that it's Canada Day. I get to have this conversation with my man here. I can't wait to bring this to you and to do more episodes of RCTV as a new outlet, as part of the Rhythm Changes extended universe here on YouTube. I'm rambling. It's my first intro. I got to tighten it up for other ones. So let's get right into it. Please enjoy this conversation with Ernesto Cervini. Our guest today is in Toronto. He's a business owner. He's now a podcast host. He launched this podcast called Canadian Songbook. You can find it at canadiansongbook.ca to go to all your podcast places, or find it on YouTube as well. There's 2 episodes out now when we're talking. He's also known as a fantastic musician who's won and been nominated for Junos, and a publicist and a person about the Canadian jazz town. And for me, personally, few people have been more generous and supportive towards what I'm doing. So please welcome Ernesto Cervini.
Hey, well, thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here and chatting with you.
Yeah, making that connection from the West Coast to back east. You come out here often. I still haven't even come to the GTA one single time in the times that we've known each other yet. So I'm due.
Yeah, it's your turn.
Yeah, it's my turn real soon. That's funny, actually. If you think about which 5 years those have been, 2020 till now, it kind of makes sense, but
Right.
My excuses are running thin.
Right.
So we met in 2020, and we actually met because you worked on my debut album, and it was not long after that that we would become more frequent correspondence as Rhythm Changes got going as well. But maybe a fun place to start would just be for you, in all the different hats that you wear, from a bird's eye view. If you look at that time, 2020, 2021, eventful time, tumultuous time, if you compare what you were doing then, and you had some really cool stuff going on then too. I think your first Juno win was around that time. But if you go to bird's eye view and you think about that time in your life versus now 5 years later, what feels different to you? How do you feel about that?
Wow. Yeah, I guess a lot has changed obviously in the world. I feel like, I feel like in those 5 years, in terms of all of the stuff that I've been working on, everything's just become a little more established and a little more, I think the best word is established. I did win the 2020 Juno for Jazz Album of the Year, and so that really helped in terms of my playing career. It just, it's a nice bit of recognition, and it makes it easier to approach festivals and club owners, across Canada and even North America and abroad, because it does mean something. So that, that certainly helped, and it was very exciting and lots of fun. And in terms of the publicity thing, I have 5 more years of experience. Everything is changing constantly in the publicity world, as things are moving more online. You'd think 5 years ago everything was already online, and it was, but it's still, a lot of the people that write about jazz and have jazz radio stations are generally older, so
Yep.
Change moves a little slower. So things are still gradually changing and evolving, and of course, even doing publicity for musicians, and people are much more concerned about streaming than they were 5 years ago. So it's just, everything's kind of evolving, and I think a really important thing, I think in any career, as a musician for sure, but as a business owner, as a entrepreneur, anything like that, is you have to just be willing and able to evolve as things move. So yeah, it's been a crazy time. That's for sure.
Yeah, same. Yeah, it makes sense to me to hear that because in a lot of ways you're doing all those same things that you were doing back then, but you've just accumulated more wisdom and runway and capabilities by continuing them because it's more than 5 years. Obviously, you were already experienced at that time, but it just gets all the chaos that happened since then has fed into these things that you've kept doing. You're still in the game.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are some new things. I'm the artistic director of the Markham Jazz Festival. Markham is a town just north of Toronto, which has been really cool. I think this upcoming festival is my third year. I think third, or maybe it's fourth. I think it's my third. So that's a new thing that's exciting. And of course, this podcast that you mentioned is brand new. And both of those are not necessarily things I ever thought I would do, but I kind of go with the attitude of just say yes and kind of see what happens. So whenever opportunities arise, generally my first instinct is yes, without even thinking about it. And then I think about it, and then usually I say yes anyways. So because I definitely know people who their first instinct is to say no. But I don't know, I've just been kind of, I don't know, raised or I don't know. I just grew into this. Anytime there's an opportunity, I just want to jump at it.
Yeah, comes across. I can get behind that too. Yeah, that makes sense. Because I was gonna ask if you thought that was particular to you, if you thought that was like a survival skill for being in this world, maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit of both. I think, being a musician, you have to be able to, well, not only pivot, but you have to be pretty malleable and be able to use your skills in lots of different ways. Or you don't have to, but it's definitely easier to make a living if you're able to kind of just stretch your abilities and find different ways to kind of make music a part of your life, and find different ways to make money making music. And if it's only gigging, it's great. I mean, my favorite moments are when I'm at the drums. Pretty much, that's my happiest place. I also love my family, but my happiest place is, okay, I'll put it this way: when the happiest place I am when I'm working, definitely at a drum set. But I think being able to do all this other stuff helps me be able to make the music I want to make, and really focus on that. And so making music never really feels like a job to me. It's just like joy. It's really great.
Are you also a charter member of the "you're always smiling when you play and that's what people ask you about after the gig" club? Because I'm in that club.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's hard not to smile when you're making music. It's pretty great to be making music with people, whether I'm on stage and people are watching me or not. I don't care. I don't need an audience to enjoy it. So I think I can't help it, but I also think it's a really beautiful and open way to make music with other people, because I also really enjoy playing with people who look like they're having a good time when they're making music. Like, that is important to me. That I don't want to. I always find it harder to play with musicians who don't look like they're enjoying themselves when they play, because then I just feel it makes me second guess myself, or it just kind of dampens the mood. And I don't know. It's generally, it feels like a celebration anytime I'm making music. So I just want that to happen. And I feel like, it helps to put other people at ease too. When you're smiling and you're having a good time and you're looking at other people and you're encouraging. And I've started, over the years, I've started getting more and more vocal when I'm playing too. So like, just, saying stuff when people are soloing, and like, I don't mean to do it. It's not something I think about. It just happens. Where someone will play something, I'm like, woo, yeah. And I can't help it. It just comes out. So I think, I think it's pretty important.
Yeah, pretty important. Good advice too. Yeah, good message. I'm right there with you. That's a thing for me as well. So you gotta be smiling. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. Okay, so you also founded a label brand called TPR Records. I remember that from its very first releases when you started sending them to me at Rhythm Changes. Canadian Songbook, the podcast, is now part of the TPR umbrella as well. This is something else that is relatively new in this period of time. So, what is the position of this thing in your world? Could be how it pertains to this podcast, but where's it going? What's going on with TPR Records?
So TPR was actually, we started right in 2020. I think our first release was in, I want to say, the fall of 2020. So, what brilliant timing. But it was kind of something that was dreamed up between me and my sister, Amy, who lives in New York, and her husband, my brother-in-law, Oded Levery. And so Oded runs a label in New York called Anzik Records with Anat Cohen. And I had released my first first handful of albums on Anzik Records. And it was just through talking with Oded and Amy, and we thought, why don't we make a Canadian label, a Canadian only label? Now I know there's others that exist. This isn't a new thing. But we thought, well, why don't we do this, and we can, curate the kind of music that we want to be putting out and the artists that we want to work with. And at the time, a group that I co-lead called Toontown with Kelly Jefferson and Artie Roth, we had a brand new album coming out, and I had talked to Oded about putting it out on Anzik, and he said, well, why don't we just start our own label? And so that's kind of where it started, and it's been a lot of fun. I love working with Amy and Oded. They're both very wonderful musicians and very, very smart people. And so that's been a real pleasure to work on. And it's been great to just release some beautiful music in the world. We've had a couple Juno nominations for the label, which has been great. Last year, we put out an album by Sarah Jerem, and called Magpie. It was beautiful double album with this amazing jazz orchestra. She wrote this incredible music, like an 8-part suite. And yeah, I play on it, so I'm a little biased, but I was so proud of her for this incredible work that she had come up with and put out. She put together this amazing orchestra to play it, and so that was really exciting. To have that nominated, and I think what else, we had a couple others. Anyways, it's been really fun to work on, and and who knows, we're keeping, we want to keep going with it and keep putting out great music and supporting Canadian artists and seeing where we can take it.
Yeah, I wonder if we are now converging towards when you decided to start this podcast. How does that fit into the timeline of some of this stuff that we've been talking about?
Yeah, so the podcast was inspired by my last album. So I put out an album with my band Turboprop called A Canadian Songbook. And the idea behind the album was to kind of acknowledge, pretty much to acknowledge what a proud Canadian I've been my whole life. I really, living in the US for 4 years probably brought it out even more. Being there. I mean, I had, there was actually a pretty good contingent of Canadians that I was surrounded by in New York, but yeah, I was always a very proud Canadian, and listening to Canadian music all the time, not even on purpose, it's just kind of what I grew up with, and music that I love, and be it jazz or pop or rock or whatever. And so I wanted to release an album that was all Canadian composed music. And so there's a couple originals of my own, couple songs from other bandmates in Turboprop. And then I thought it'd be really interesting to record two songs that were written by some of my peers in the Canadian jazz scene. Because, you know, back in the 50s and 60s, people were recording each other's music all the time, right? Someone would write a great tune, and you'd be like, I want to record that on my album, and people would just record each other's music, and it wasn't really a big deal. But now I feel like, you know, most people don't cover other people's songs. You play your own music, and you might cover some standards or some whatever. But I haven't seen too many jazz albums where someone's covering another, like a peer's music. And I thought that would be really interesting. And because Turboprop has a specific sound to it, I thought it'd be really fun. So I took a song by Alison Au, a great alto saxophone player. And then I took a song by James Hill, who's a wonderful piano player, and arranged those for Turboprop. And then the other two songs on the album were pop covers. So I did a song by the Bare Naked Ladies and a song by Our Lady Peace, both bands that I've been listening to since the 90s and kind of grew up with. And so, you know, releasing this album that was very Canadian centric and Canada focused, it got me kind of thinking about the story of growing up in Canada and becoming a musician in this infrastructure and in this society and what it's like. And I thought it'd be really interesting to talk to different people about their kind of journey from childhood up to kind of when they first feel like they've made it, whatever that is, whatever that means. And I wanted to make it, I mean, the first season of this podcast, I don't yet know if there's going to be more, but there's definitely one season, 6 episodes. And the first season, a lot of it really does reflect on the album. So I talked to Jim Cregan from the Bare Naked Ladies. And that was such a thrill because I've been such a fan of his and of the Bare Naked Ladies forever. And so it was really interesting to talk to him about growing up in Scarborough, just outside of Toronto, or I guess part of Toronto now. And, just, the indie rock scene and the indie pop scene and coming up in that industry. And then the second person I talked to was Mike Murley, who is kind of, a Canadian jazz icon who has played everywhere in the world, but across Canada millions of times or not millions, but many, many times. And, I grew up listening to Mike. I remember going to see him as a teenager and my older sister, Amy, studied with him. And so he's kind of been a part of my life forever. And then he played on my first album. He was one of my teachers at the University of Toronto. So we've been connected for a long time. But again, it was really interesting to hear about his life. He grew up on the East Coast in Nova Scotia and how music found him and how he ended up doing what he does now. I also had the privilege of chatting with Alison Au, who it was interesting to chat with her about her life. She grew up in Toronto, but both of her parents moved to Canada from abroad. So it was a kind of a different upbringing. I wanted to chat with her, of course, because we recorded one of her songs. So there's a nice connection there. I also chatted with a wonderful opera singer named Elliot Mador, who grew up in Etobicoke, which is where I live, on the west end of Toronto. But then he studied classical voice all through high school, and then he went off to Curtis Institute in Philadelphia, and then was soon like singing in the opera houses in the Czech Republic and in Europe, and like he's a real kind of opera star. And so it was really, again, just a completely different story, but very interesting to see how he found music. And and so I thought it'd be really interesting to gather these stories and see where the common threads are. And there's a lot of people end up mentioning, the jazz people and even Jim Cregan are mentioning like the Boss Brass and Phil Nimmons, and Jim Cregan, completely unprovoked, brought up Jim Vivian and Mike Murley as people who inspired him. And so it's interesting to see how all this stuff kind of connects. And and all these people kind of, there's all these different layers. Another person I chatted with is Holly Nimmons, who runs the Canadian Music Center, but also is Phil Nimmons' daughter. And so it was, fascinating to hear about her life growing up in the Nimmons household, and then how she found music advocacy and how she feels about the music scene and the music industry. And since I mentioned 5 of the interviews, I'll say the last, well, not the last person, but the other person I chatted with was Tara Davidson, who happens to be in Turboprop, and whose story I'm the most familiar with, because I started playing with Tara when I was 12, and we've been making music together for the last, how old am I? Last, I guess, 31 years, which is crazy, because I've known her longer than, like, I have one friend I've known longer than that, and then my family. And so it's really neat to talk to her about her story and how she grew up in this industry, and also with her and Allison as females in a male-dominated industry, although it is changing and it's evolving. But when Tara we went to school together at the University of Toronto, and there was no female instrumental teachers at the school, and there were very few female students. So it's changed drastically now. 20, maybe not 20 years, maybe 20 years. Yes, 20 years later. But still, so it's just bringing all these stories to light, and hearing what everyone has to say about how they kind of discovered music and got inspired by this scene.
Yeah, I have friends now that I have 1 or 2 people who I started playing with when I was about 13. So I'm 17 years into that. So I want to keep it going. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And, a lot of the people that I play with now, I've been playing with for a long time at this point. But, someone like Tara is basically family. Like she's practically a sister to me. We've really been making music forever together. And I was in her band. She's been in my bands. We just work together all the time. And I think it's important to find people like that, especially if it works musically and emotionally and personally. Like, I'm the type of person that once I find those people, I grab on and I hold on pretty tight. because it's great to play with different people, and I'm trying to do that a little more actually recently, is just like play with lots of different people, because I don't want to get kind of stuck in a box where I only play with the same 8 to 10 people. It's very easy to do, especially if you love the people you play with, but there's so many talented people and different, and they can inspire different things from you. So I think it's important to kind of stay open and kind of invite evolution into your playing, and invite other people's experiences and different inspiration into your own playing. But yeah, when you find someone you love, you kind of just want to keep making music with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, it resonates a lot with me the way you're saying it too. Yeah, I appreciate that. So what do you know about making media like this under a show, or any show that has been part of your thing? What do you know about making or hosting something like this that a lot of other people won't know? I have 2 questions that are in this format. The first one is maybe so obvious to like you or I that we wouldn't even think about it anymore. Second one, maybe less so. But the first one, what do you know about making or hosting media because you're an artist? Because again, for us, like, we might take that for granted. So many of the people who do this now came up playing like we did, but not everybody did, and historically not everybody did. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think as an artist, we've been, some would say forced, or someone would say encouraged, to be able to figure out different ways to promote ourselves and to just get our music out there and get our ideas and our artistry out there. So I think, first of all, my first experience with doing something like this is actually just being interviewed myself and talking to people and getting used to being interviewed. And at the same time as I'm being interviewed, I'm still listening to the interviewer. I'm checking out what they're doing. Not, obviously I'm focused on what I'm saying, but I'm also, you can't help but be aware of like who you enjoy talking to and who not so much, and you pick up on those cues, and then through that, I think, and then also just watching podcasts, listening to podcasts, checking out different interview series, you kind of gain an understanding of how to communicate with people, and how to, I think one of the most important things is just listening. So, and to be honest, that part was pretty easy, because you're chatting with engaging and kind of fascinating people. So listening wasn't too hard, but it was, so I think that really helped. And then, to be honest, talking about 2020, during the pandemic, I kind of was forced to discover some new skills that had to do with technology and recording and home recording. And I think we all did. You just kind of had to figure out how to keep doing what you were doing, but not doing it at clubs anymore. So I did get a lot better at, recording and getting you. I mean, I think we all got used to talking to a computer, and like, Zoom became a part of our lives. And so yeah, I think that all really helped. And because I feel very comfortable talking about music, through doing interviews and other stuff, you could probably tell, because you ask me a question and I go for 5 minutes. So I'm very comfortable talking about this stuff. So it made it very comfortable for me to ask someone else about this stuff and listen to them and let them go and hear their story.
Yeah, you and I, we don't need any prompting to continue talking. Nobody needs to fill space when they're talking to either of us.
No, not very often.
Okay, here's the second one. What do you know about this because you are a publicist?
Interesting. So I think being a publicist has helped me wrap my head around the idea of creating a compelling story. And now with jazz albums, which is what I work on, I work with jazz artists. Not every album has a compelling story, and that's okay too, because you can't really invent. You don't want to invent one, because then it comes across as not real. People can tell. So that was something that when I was releasing albums, my first handful of albums, there was no real story. There was no overarching kind of idea behind them. And so my last couple albums have had more of that, like the Canadian Songbook, obviously, all music on Canadian artists, on
Joy.
Canadian compositions. Joy was an album that was all inspired by these incredible books by Louise Penny. Yeah. So those, and I think that was the first one where I really found my muse, you could say. Like I had been kind of looking for something, and then that one just came and hit me over the head. I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. So I think that was something that, as a publicist, I realized, like, wow, when there's a compelling story to go along with the music, it really engages people. Not only radio people and press, but also listeners. People get it, because jazz can be so abstract that sometimes even jazz, not just, non-jazz fans, but even jazz fans can have a hard time kind of identifying with it or understanding it or really getting inside of it, where when you give it some context, all of a sudden it's way easier to understand, and it's way easier to appreciate and absorb and really get into. So I feel like it's kind of the same thing with, when you're talking to someone and you're interviewing someone, is you're trying to pull out that story and find that story, and it's in there. I mean, we all have interesting and compelling stories. There's always an interesting angle to it. It's just being able to find it, and I feel like most musicians don't need a ton of prompting to get there, It depends on who they are, especially the more seasoned musicians. Kind of, they know their story at this point, so they know what it is about their upbringing that makes them different, right? And I think that's the beautiful thing, is we all come from these different situations. We were all raised differently. We were all raised in different environments and different communities, and we all came to music very differently. And so I think it's that difference. That's the part that I find fascinating, is that, like, I was raised in a family of music. Both my older sisters played music. My mom runs a music school. I started playing piano when I was 5. By the time I was like 12, I was playing 3 instruments. That's all I did. I just did music my whole life. But then, I'll talk to someone else who's like, yeah, I started playing, bass in grade 11, and I kind of liked it. And then I auditioned for university and I got in. And so I started taking it more seriously. And I'm like, whoa, wait, you just kind of liked it in grade 11, and then now you're, a professional musician. It's, to me, that's so fascinating that we can have these vastly different stories and still all kind of arrive in the same community.
Can I tell you about how mine is vastly different from yours?
Sure, please.
So for me, I didn't grow up musical at all, and I took to it when playing music happened to become the first chance I had at the right age in life, at around 13 or 14, to have like a thing of my own, like something that I felt like I chose, and where I actually felt like I was ready or capable or whatever to make friends and get out into the world through a new thing that I could feel like I chose, even though, of course, it was provided to me very generously, in this case by a high school band program, with that opportunity and the facility to make these new friends and stuff. But this was the first time when I was just coming into the right age for it that I actually felt like it was my choice, and it wasn't just something that I ended up doing just because I had to, or it was part of the day, or just stuff you do when you're a kid. This is like a big identity forming thing for me, but it came at that point. It didn't come through childhood or anything necessarily before that, and that was really important to me, that it could keep being this thing that felt like my thing.
Right. Yeah, that's so interesting. I think I'm even more fascinated with it nowadays because I have children and I'm forcing them to play music, for better or for worse. And so, I can tell they're both extremely musical. Like, they're very musical kids and they're very talented. But I do struggle with the, am I doing this? Like, is me making them practice every day the right thing, or is this going to turn them off of music? I mean, so far, so good. They both really love music, and so I think I'm doing. But a story like that makes me instantly go, oh man, maybe that. Interesting. Because like my son's not even 13 yet. He's 12. He already has his grade 8 piano. He's a great little drummer. I don't know, but
it's a win-win, right? Like it's a win-win so. Because either he continues with the great musical nurturing that he's received so far, or he finds his thing. And like, you would be stoked for that too.
Right. You're absolutely right. And I do secretly hope for him specifically. I think he's going to find another instrument. I think he's going to get to a band program and he can't play piano because there's no piano. And he's not going to want to play drums because it's going to be boring. And he's going to be like, you know what? I'm going to try the trumpet. And then he'll be like, oh my God, I love this. That's what I'm kind of hoping. I'm like, and then the fact that he has all this background, that he can read music great and he can read rhythms great and he understands chords and all that stuff, means he'll pick it up super fast. And he'll like go from not knowing how to play the instrument to probably being one of the best in the class within a month. And then he'll just like take off. This is my hope. but we don't know. And I also don't really want my children to be musicians. I just want them to appreciate and love music. So that's always been really important to me, that music is a part of their life. But I'm not trying to groom the next whatever. I just want them to be good human beings who love music. I want them to love music, but I don't need them to play it professionally. That's for sure.
You don't need to be a musical hockey dad.
No, well, speaking of which, I'm also a hockey dad. My son plays single A hockey as well. So we don't have a lot of time. We don't have a lot of free time.
Yeah.
But I'm not one of those hockey dads. Although I do bring a drum to the games and I play. I bang on a floor tom. So maybe I am that dad. Oof.
Wait, so I'm a Leafs fan out here in BC. We're both Leafs fans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, rough go this year. Yeah, we just saw the Florida Panthers win the Stanley Cup yesterday as we're recording this. So.
Yeah. I mean, there's two sides to it. It's always the one side is you're like, well, we lost to the champions. Like, what are you going to do? We took them to 7 games. It happened. And then the other side of it is like, okay, it's another year that we,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think things are going to change. I think change is good. Whether they're going to get better or worse, who knows? We don't have to talk about it too much because I bet you there's people listening who hate the Maple Leafs. And that's fair. So we'll see.
Yeah, at some point, the most important thing is to change, even if you take a step back numbers wise. So, yeah.
Yep.
Life lessons right there in sports.
Yeah, exactly.
So I got a couple of maybe more pod nerdy or technical things as we wrap here. You mentioned that you don't know if or when there's going to be more, and that you have a seasonal approach where you've already recorded all the episodes and you're going to slow roll them out and stuff. What determines for you, if you know yet, whether or not there's going to be more?
I'm not totally sure, to be honest. There's a little bit of money. It did cost some money to make it. So, and I had some grant funding that helped with that, with the initial push. So, but I won't anymore. So it has to be, I have to figure out how to do it, so that I can afford to do it. I can't imagine I'm going to make any money. So I
can confirm.
Yes. But I will say I have been really enjoying rolling it out. Like, it's been really exciting to me. I didn't anticipate being as excited about it as I am. So it's really cool to get it out there, and it is making me really kind of excited to do some more. So I hope we do. I really hope we do.
Yeah. How do you have any expectations about the outcome of the podcast? Because there's a whole spectrum of what you could have. You could be like, oh, I just want to have fun making it and putting it out. Then there's a whole spectrum to like certain outcomes that you might expect or that you might need. How do you think about, because I've gone through my own journey with this over 4 or 5 years now, of it's changed so much, right? So
right.
It's such a moment in time, but like, how do you think about what your expectations are for something like this, especially at launch? It's interesting.
Yeah. To be honest, I'm not sure I have any expectations. I think it's important for people to hear these stories. So I hope, to get in touch with, in September, I'm definitely going to get in touch with a bunch of the universities across Canada and just say, hey, this exists. Canadian, like, people who are studying jazz in Canada should know about Canada and should know about the Canadian, story. I also have a playlist on Spotify, although I hate Spotify for what it is. But I made this great Canadian playlist of all this great Canadian jazz that I just think it's really important for people in Canada to embrace Canada. And I think because of the globalization, because of the internet and YouTube, I've even noticed through teaching at the University of Toronto, like, a lot of the students aren't necessarily checking out Canadian jazz. They're checking out, who's playing at Smalls and who's playing, other stuff that they can just watch on their computers, but they're not necessarily going out and seeing music in Toronto or, in the city. And so I think, that's something that I'm really hoping to help promote is and to be honest, through everything I do, I'm trying to help promote Canadian jazz, Canadian artists. For a while there, actually, something else we worked on is I had something called Orange Grove Radio for a while. I did it for about a year. We did a weekly show for a year. We did 52 episodes, and it was playing on radio stations across the globe, and it was really cool. And I did it with my friend Jenna Marie, who does the social media work for Orange Grove, and she was the host, and I was the producer. And I still have people asking me about it and saying, "Oh man, you should do Orange Grove Radio again. It was so great." And so, but it didn't make it. We made $0, and it was a lot of work. And so after a year, Jenna was like, we could not do it. And I was like, I couldn't. I think I did pay her, but it wasn't very much. I just gave her like a small, something for doing it, but it wasn't enough. Admittedly, and she knew that too. I was like, listen, I can't pay you, but this would be fun, and if you're into it,
you have to justify the show. Yeah, pace.
Yeah, but we were putting it on all these radio stations. We weren't getting any money, and eventually I was like, okay, well, I can't. So I guess I would love for this to kind of have a little bit of I would just love people to listen to it. I would love for it to have a bit of a following, and for people to check it out and get something out of listening to these stories, whether it's being inspired or just, it's just information, but hopefully it's being inspired. I mean, these are all pretty inspiring people. And so I think if nothing else, or not even nothing else, if anything, that's what I would want. And just want to get these stories kind of told.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I've made a couple, probably between 100 and 200 podcast episodes so far since 2020, and for various clients or for myself. And the guest, I haven't proportionally decreased my guest wish list. My guest wish list has continued to be as proportionally long as ever, even with more episodes in the back catalog. So there's no competition, fear with something like this. When I see you come along, I'm like, thank goodness, because I'm never going to be able to have all the guests that I would want to have on. Somebody else adds into that pot, right?
Right, exactly. And I mean, yeah, it's just great for people to be able to tell their story and talk about music. And there's a lot of people who are interested in music, and there's a lot of people who are interested in what's happening here. I can tell you just from the publicity side, sending Canadian jazz around the world, the amount of people who are like, man, there's so much great jazz coming from Canada. And I go, yeah, I know.
We know, yeah.
I'm quite aware of that. So just to be able to continue to promote that and get that out there, I think is so incredibly important and vital.
Yeah. Is there anything else on your mind here as we roll into the summertime that we haven't mentioned yet before we wrap?
Not really. No, I think we kind of covered it. I can tell you we'll be releasing new podcasts the second Wednesday of every month, from now until I believe September. The last one comes out. What are we? July, August, September? No, October. So there'll be 4 more: July, August, September, October, and then who knows? Maybe a whole bunch more after that. I sure hope so.
Yeah. Well, it's quite possible that I'll end up dropping this on July 1st, so that could be fun, given the theme of the show.
Perfect. So, I love it.
It's always a great pleasure to see you and talk with you. I look forward to the next chance I get to hear you play drums and see you in person on this side. I'm due to come to Toronto, so all that is yet to come. Thank you, Ernesto, for taking the time to chat with me.
Thank you so much, Will. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning into RCTV. If you liked it, give this video a like, drop a comment if you haven't done it yet. I want to hear from you, know what you think, who you might want me to talk to next, or anything else you got to say to me. And make sure you subscribe to this channel so that we can keep this rolling and you get new episodes of RCTV and the other things I do, like the Upsample podcast with my friend Carson Toro, or even my own music projects that I'm involved in. this is a space that I want to use more often here as we go through 2025. So thank you very much for being here, and I will talk to you soon.